Some animals just aren't meant for first class." The words, sharp as broken glass, sliced through the terminal's hum. Gate Supervisor Karen O'Malley sneered, her thumb flicking a cheap lighter. The spark erupted, a tiny, vicious star dancing just inches from Dr. Evelyn Reed's passport. Karen's pudgy fingers, nails painted a garish crimson, pinched the corner of the official blue document over a steel trash receptacle. Her cold, pale eyes, magnified by her glasses, fixated on Evelyn's face, drinking in the anticipated shock, the fear, the humiliation. She was savoring this moment of perceived power. What would you do if your very identity was about to be set on fire in front of a crowd of strangers for a crime you didn't commit? We're about to witness a masterclass in what happens when petty rage collides with unshakable authority. Make sure you're subscribed to Blacktail Stories and have those notifications turned on, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of this. Evelyn's breath hitched, an involuntary reaction she instantly suppressed. Around them, the mundane drone of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport on the busiest travel day of the year fractured. Heads turned. Phones, like metallic predators, emerged from pockets and purses, their lenses focusing, recording. Karen, emboldened by her audience, used the back of her hand to sweep Evelyn's boarding pass from the podium. The flimsy paper drifted down, landing with a soft finality on the scuffed linoleum near Evelyn's simple leather flats. "Go on, pick it up," Karen commanded, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "On your knees where you belong." The tiny flame from the lighter licked at the passport's edge. The embossed gold lettering of United States of America began to bubble, turning from a symbol of freedom to a black, cancerous char. Acrid smoke, a foul ghost, curled toward the ceiling. "Put those phones away," Karen barked at the sea of recording passengers. "You don't need to witness this fraud's little drama." Evelyn's leather satchel, heavy with government-issued electronics, slipped from her shoulder, the strap catching on her wrist. Tucked inside, shielded from view, was a wallet containing an identity far more powerful than the one currently melting. Have you ever been so thoroughly debased, so publicly dismantled, that a stranger attempts to incinerate your legal existence while a crowd treats it like a spectator sport? The corner of the passport caught, blossoming into a bright orange flower of destruction. Karen's grin stretched across her face, a grotesque mask of triumph, as the Federal Eagle emblem dissolved into black soot. "There," she cooed, as if soothing a child. She dropped the burning document into the metal bin. "Problem solved?" Evelyn stared into the bin as her identity was consumed. The blue cover curled like a dying leaf, the pages crackled, and her own face in the photograph warped in the intense heat, her features melting away behind a bubbling plastic laminate. "You just willfully destroyed a federal document," Evelyn said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of cold, hard fact. "I destroyed a cheap fake," Karen shot back, crossing her arms over her chest, satisfaction radiating from her like heat. "That's what we do with trash that tries to sneak into the front of the plane." A few feet away, a teenager named Leo Carter held his phone steady, his live stream now broadcasting to 52,000 viewers. The comment section was a waterfall of frantic text. "OMG, she actually did it, and call the feds right now, and that's a federal crime." The massive digital display above the gate blinked with an indifferent finality. Flight 1881 to Zurich. Boarding. 42 minutes remaining. Tucked into the waistband of Evelyn's slacks, a satellite phone vibrated with a unique, pulsing rhythm. The encrypted caller ID read, "Pentagon SecDef Urgent." She ignored it. The smoke from the bin, thick and oily, finally triggered the overhead fire sensors. A maintenance worker hurried over with an extinguisher, but Karen waved him away with imperial disdain. "Just a little document disposal. Everything's under control." From the gate seating area, a business traveler named Susan Webb was also live streaming. Her TikTok caption blunt: "Racist gate agent burns black woman's passport at ATL." Within 60 seconds, the hashtag #WantPassportKaren was trending nationwide. Evelyn bent down, not on her knees, but in a controlled crouch to retrieve her boarding pass. The paper was now marred with the dirty print of a shoe. "Stay down there," Karen's voice lashed out. "It's a better look for you." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Several more phones began recording at that exact moment, capturing the raw, undisguised bigotry. Evelyn rose slowly, the boarding pass in her hand. Her first-class ticket, which Karen had dismissed as fraudulent, bore a subtle, almost invisible watermark in the corner. A tiny eagle, the seal of federal priority clearance. Her satchel contained her Department of Defense inspector credentials, still hidden, still waiting. "Ma'am, I have a mandate to be on this flight," Evelyn stated, her voice a flat line of professional calm. "Not with a pile of ashes, you don't," Karen sneered, poking at the smoldering remains with a ballpoint pen. "Look at this garbage." She held up a charred piece for the crowd to see. "Cheap foreign ink, always goes up fast." The pages had separated in the fire, revealing the ghostly outlines of Evelyn's entry stamps from Germany, South Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan. A decade of legitimate high-level government travel, now reduced to carbon and smoke. "I can verify my identity digitally through the federal system," Evelyn offered, knowing the response. "Systems down," Karen lied with the ease of long practice. "Besides, someone with a fake passport probably has a dozen fake IDs. What's next? A fake driver's license? A fake doctorate?" The satellite phone buzzed again, the vibration more insistent. This time, the caller ID simply read, "Joint Chiefs." Airport Security Officer Mark Ramsey arrived, his expression a mixture of boredom and annoyance, drawn by the smoke and the burgeoning crowd. He saw the burned passport, the smug gate agent, and the calm black woman, and made an instant, damning calculation. "What's going on here?" he asked Karen, completely ignoring Evelyn. "Attempted fraudulent boarding." "I disposed of the counterfeit document according to protocol," Karen announced, gesturing to the smoldering bin as if presenting a trophy. This woman was trying to get on an international flight with a ridiculously obvious fake. Mark peered into the ashes. "Ma'am," he said, finally addressing Evelyn. "Did you attempt to use a counterfeit document at a federal checkpoint?" "That was a legitimate, government-issued passport," Evelyn replied, her gaze unwavering. "Sure it was," Karen snorted. "That's why it went up like a sheet of newspaper. Real federal documents have security features. They don't just burst into flames." The crowd of passengers began to murmur, taking sides. A woman in a Chanel suit nodded in agreement with Karen. "Good for you," she said loudly. "You have to be vigilant. These people are getting so bold." But the younger passengers, led by Leo's viral stream, were broadcasting their outrage to the world. Leo's viewer count rocketed past 150,000. The comments were now calling for Karen's immediate arrest. Evelyn's satchel shifted as she adjusted her stance, and a small, heavy-duty chain attached to a leather wallet inside became visible for a split second. She subtly adjusted the strap, keeping the credentials concealed. A supervisor, Janet Phillips, finally bustled onto the scene, alerted by the dozens of passenger complaints about a fire at the gate. She took in the scene at a glance. The smoldering bin, the security guard, the sea of recording phones, and Evelyn, standing in the eye of the hurricane with an unnerving stillness. "Karen, report," Janet commanded. "Fraud attempt," Karen said, her chest swelling with pride. "Document was clearly counterfeit. I destroyed it as per airline security protocol. I protected this flight. Janet looked into the trash bin. Fragments of Evelyn's photo were still visible, charred but recognizable. The disdain on Janet's face was barely veiled as she turned to Evelyn. "Ma'am, trying to board a flight with fake documents is a serious federal offense. We're going to have to detain you until federal authorities can get here." Evelyn's phone rang again. This time it wasn't a vibration, but a loud, piercing series of tones, a sound utterly alien to the airport's normal symphony of announcements and chatter. The display read, "White Situation Room." "I need to take this," Evelyn stated. "You need to cooperate," Janet snapped back. "You don't get phone privileges when you're being detained for a federal crime." The boarding display clicked. Flight 1881 to Zurich. Boarding. 35 minutes remaining. Evelyn watched as a draft from the air conditioner lifted a flake of ash from the bin. It had once been her diplomatic immunity visa page. Now it was just dust. More security officers were arriving, forming a loose, intimidating circle. They all saw Evelyn as the problem, not the victim. Karen was basking in the attention, holding court for the sympathetic passengers. "It's always the ones who act so calm," she declared loudly. "They think if they play innocent, you'll believe them. But I've been doing this for 20 years. I can spot a fake a mile away." The airline's station manager, Tom Rodriguez, came storming up, his face red with anger. "Why does my gate smell like a barbecue? What in the hell is going on?" he demanded. "Document fraud, Tom," Janet reported, pointing at Evelyn. "Karen caught this woman red-handed trying to use a fake passport. She disposed of the evidence." Tom peered into the bin. Evelyn's half-melted photo stared back at him. The gold federal seal had puddled into a small metallic tear on the bottom of the can. "Ma'am, you brought a fake passport to a federal facility," he said, shaking his head. "You're in a world of trouble." Evelyn's phone vibrated again. "Homeland Security." Priority flashed on the screen. She reached for it. "Don't touch the phone," Officer Ramsey commanded, putting his hand near his sidearm. "You're a suspect in a federal investigation. You don't get to make calls." Leo's live stream had crested 300,000 viewers. His screen was a blur of comments. "She's destroying evidence," one read. "That is obstruction of justice." The boarding display ticked down. Boarding, 28 minutes remaining. The circle of security had tightened around Evelyn. She remained standing, her hands visible, but her satchel strap had slipped again. The heavy-duty chain and the corner of the leather credential wallet were now clearly visible. "Look at her, not even breaking a sweat," Karen announced to the crowd, her voice full of theatrical indignation. "Classic criminal composure. Thinks she's smarter than all of us." But some in the crowd were starting to have doubts. "That ringtone," a man in military fatigue said to his wife. "That's a priority alert tone for a government satellite phone. You don't just get those on Amazon." "Criminals steal things, dear," his wife replied, though she too looked uncertain. "Stole it, probably," Karen countered, having overheard him. "It's all part of the act." The flight crew, led by Captain James Morrison, arrived, their path to the jet bridge blocked by the commotion. "We have smoke, a crowd, and a half-dozen security guards at our gate," Captain Morrison said, his voice the epitome of professional concern. "Can someone tell me why my flight is being delayed?" "Federal document investigation, Captain," Tom replied. "A passenger tried to board with a fake ID. It's been neutralized." "Neutralized?" Morrison looked from the smoldering bin to Evelyn. "You burned it?" "It was an obvious fake," Karen insisted, her voice getting shrill. "Real documents don't burn that way." For the first time since the ordeal began, a flicker of something other than calm crossed Evelyn's face. It was the detached interest of a scientist observing an illogical phenomenon. "Sir," she said, addressing Captain Morrison. All paper-based documents, regardless of security threads or watermarks, combust when exposed to an open flame. The material composition doesn't alter the basic principles of thermodynamics. Captain Morrison looked at Evelyn more closely. Her precise, almost academic language was jarringly inconsistent with the profile of a common criminal. The boarding display updated again. Boarding, 22 minutes remaining. Evelyn's phone now showed 19 missed calls from various secure federal and military numbers. Her satchel had shifted further, and the credential wallet was now partially exposed. The corner of a gold seal, an eagle clutching arrows, and an olive branch caught the bright terminal lights. A new security officer, Jennifer Walsh, noticed it. "Ma'am, what's in your bag?" she asked, her tone more cautious than her colleagues. Evelyn glanced down. Personal identification. "More fakes," Karen declared, pointing a trembling finger. "I bet she's got a whole wallet full of them. She's a professional con artist." This is the moment everything changes. Do you think Karen is about to get what she deserves? Or will she somehow talk her way out of this? Let me know your predictions in the comments right now. And if you're finding this story as gripping as I am, smash that like button to let us know you're with us. Tom Rodriguez reached for Evelyn's satchel. "We'll need to see all forms of identification you have." "I would prefer to handle my own credentials," Evelyn said, her voice dropping a degree, the quiet becoming heavy. "You lost your preferences and your rights when you committed a federal crime on airport property," Janet snapped. The combined live stream audience across a dozen platforms had now surpassed 500,000 people. The hashtags, Mordbotcher Passport Karen and Burned at the Gate, were the top 2 trending topics in the world. Captain Morrison's radio crackled. "Flight 1881, this is ATL Tower. We're showing an indefinite ground hold at your gate due to a security incident. Advise status." "Tower, we have a document investigation in progress," the captain responded, his eyes still locked on Evelyn. Evelyn watched as the last identifiable piece of her passport, a corner with the embossed word Liberty, curled into black ash. Years of service, of missions in dangerous places, of quiet, vital work for her country, literally vanishing into thin air. "This is taking forever," a man in a golf shirt complained from the first-class line. "Just arrest her so we can board." "It's a federal matter now, sir," Tom explained impatiently. "We have to follow protocol." The satchel had shifted completely now. The leather wallet was almost fully visible. The gold seal of the Department of Defense was unmistakable to anyone who knew what they were looking at. Officer Ramsey, the first officer on the scene, suddenly looked ill. He had seen seals like that before, on the IDs of agents who could shut down an entire airport with a single phone call. He took an involuntary step back. Karen, however, was too consumed by her own righteous fury to notice. She poked at the ashes again with her pen. "See how it's all just dust? That proves it was cheap. Made in some basement in another country, I bet." Atlanta Police Department Officer Derek Carter arrived, a veteran cop drawn by the escalating security call. He looked at the scene, at the smug gate agent, the nervous managers, and the eerily calm woman at the center of it all. He knelt and examined the ashes with a professional eye. He picked up a piece with his gloved hand. "Ma'am," he said to Evelyn, his voice respectful, "federal passports have embedded security strips made of a polymer composite. When they burn, they leave a distinct, thread-like residue." He looked pointedly at the ashes in the bin. "I see that residue right here." Karen's face went slack. "What?" "No. I know what a fake looks like. I have 20 years of experience." "Experience doesn't alter material science," Evelyn replied, her voice still unnervingly level. Officer Carter stood up and looked at Evelyn with a new, profound respect. Her composure under this level of stress, her technical vocabulary. This was not a typical fraud suspect. The boarding display showed. Boarding. 18 minutes remaining. Evelyn's satellite phone rang again with the high-pitched federal emergency tone. This time the man in military fatigues stood up. "That's a SATCOM emergency signal," he said loudly. "That is 100% a restricted government phone." "Stolen. It has to be stolen," Karen insisted, her voice cracking with desperation. Evelyn's satchel now hung open enough that her credentials were plain to see. The Golden Eagle seemed to glare at them under the fluorescent lights. Officer Carter saw it clearly. "Ma'am," he asked, his voice now deferential, "what is the nature of your identification in that bag?" Evelyn met his gaze. "Federal, officer." The two words dropped into the charged air like stones into a silent pond. Karen's triumphant smirk finally began to melt. Tom and Janet stepped closer, their eyes wide, trying to process the claim. Captain Morrison took a half-step forward, his expression intense. "What kind of federal identification?" he asked. With deliberate, unhurried grace, Evelyn Reed reached into her satchel. As hundreds of phones recorded and over 800,000 people watched online, breath held, she prepared to show them exactly who they had just tried to erase. The world was about to find out what happens when you try to burn a ghost. Evelyn withdrew a heavy, dark blue leather wallet and placed it on the counter, right next to the trash bin containing the ashes of her passport. The gold seal of the Department of Defense wasn't just a glint anymore. It was a blazing indictment under the harsh terminal lights. She opened the wallet with a slow, deliberate motion. Inside, her official credentials gleamed. The photo on the ID was the same as the one that had just been melted into an unrecognizable blob. But here it was pristine, official, and utterly intimidating. Dr. Evelyn Reed, Chief Inspector, Department of Defense, Office of the Inspector General, Special Operations Division. A profound, crushing silence fell over Gate C-34. Karen O'Malley's pen slipped from her numb fingers and clattered to the floor. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty, terrified mask. She read the badge again and again, as if willing the letters to rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. "No," she whispered, the sound barely audible. That's not possible." Evelyn then placed a second card next to the first, her official federal law enforcement authorization. The seal on it was identical to the one that had just puddled into a metallic tear in the bin. "Chief Inspector Evelyn Reed," she stated, her voice resonating with an authority that dwarfed everyone around her. "Badge number OIG 711, full federal law enforcement authority under Title 10 of the U.S. Code." Tom Rodriguez reached out with a trembling hand to examine the credentials. The holographic security features, the microprinting, the embedded metallic threads, they were flawlessly, terrifyingly authentic. You're a federal agent," he stammered. "I am the Chief Inspector for the DoD's Clandestine Operations and Infrastructure Security," Evelyn corrected him, her eyes like chips of ice. "And you, your supervisor, and your security team just aided and abetted your employee in the destruction of federal property, the obstruction of a federal investigation, and assault on a federal officer, all during an active national security audit." Janet grabbed the credentials, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped them. She scrutinized them, desperate to find a flaw, a spelling error, anything to prove they were fake. But the DoD letterhead was perfect. The federal prosecutor liaison contact information was real. Evelyn's face stared back from the official government plastic, her expression in the photo as calm and unyielding as it was now. "This has to be another fake," Janet pleaded, her voice cracking. "It's a high-quality fake." Evelyn pulled out a sleek, ruggedized tablet from her satchel and powered it on. "Would you like me to verify my commission through the secure federal officer database?" My active commission number is DODIG 0771-2025. Officer Carter, the Atlanta cop, snapped to attention. Ma'am, he said, his voice thick with apology. On behalf of my department, I am so sorry for this misunderstanding. You followed your training, officer, Evelyn said, dismissing him with a nod. Ms. O'Malley, however, she continued, turning her gaze back to Karen, has committed a series of federal felonies on a live stream witnessed by nearly 1 million people. Karen stared at the ashes of the passport, the evidence of her career suicide. The federal seal she'd melted, the government property she'd gleefully destroyed. I didn't know, she stammered, shrinking in on herself. It looked so fake. The picture seemed off. Evelyn took out a small government-issue notebook and a pen. Gate Supervisor Karen O'Malley, employee ID 784591. She began dictating to herself in a clear voice. Willfully and with malicious intent, destroyed federal identification at 14:23 Eastern Standard Time. Physical evidence. Passport remains secured in a steel receptacle. Witnesses. Approximately 300 passengers and airline staff. Digital evidence. Multiple, high-definition live streams with a current cumulative audience exceeding 950,000 viewers across TikTok, Facebook Live, and Instagram. Captain Morrison looked at Evelyn's credentials with a mixture of professional awe and dawning horror. Chief Inspector, he said respectfully, what can we do to assist your investigation? You can start by ordering your staff to preserve this entire gate as a federal crime scene, Evelyn commanded, gesturing to the bin. That trash can and its contents are now Exhibit A in a federal prosecution. Leo's live stream had shattered the 1 million viewer mark. The comments were now a tidal wave of vindication and shock. Holy crap, she's dude! She burned a spy's passport. Federal prison for Shrew. Passport Karen. Evelyn's satellite phone rang with its distinctive, piercing tone. This time, she answered it without hesitation, putting it on speaker. Inspector Reed, she said. A clipped, authoritative voice boomed from the phone, a voice that carried the acoustics of a secure command center. Reed, this is General Miller at the Pentagon. We saw the live feed. Is your operational security compromised? The sound of a 4-star general's voice silenced the entire terminal. Tom Rodriguez looked like he was going to faint. Negative, General, Evelyn replied. The operation is, in fact, proceeding ahead of schedule. The human factor vulnerability test was a resounding success. We have a textbook example of systemic bias leading to a direct breach of federal security protocols. All evidence captured from multiple digital angles. She paused, listening. Understood, sir. Federal marshals are on their way. ETA 10 minutes. Tom's face went white. Federal marshals, not airport police, not FBI, the U.S. Marshals. Evelyn continued her call. Yes, General. We have over 300 direct witnesses and, at last count, over 1 million remote viewers. Chain of custody on the digital evidence is unbreakable. The suspect is secured. She paused again. Yes, sir. A perfect test case. Maximum evidentiary value with 0 chance of plausible deniability. Read out. She ended the call. Karen O'Malley sank into a nearby passenger seat, the weight of what she had done finally crushing her. It was supposed to be fake, she whispered to no one, her eyes fixated on the bin of ashes. It looked suspicious. It had to be fake. Ms. O'Malley, Evelyn said, her voice devoid of any emotion but fact. My passport looked exactly like every other legitimate U.S. passport, because that's precisely what it was. There is no special look for a person of color traveling first class with a legitimate federal document. The suspicion was not in the document. It was in your own prejudice. Janet, the supervisor, scrambled to do damage control, trying to insulate the airline from Karen's actions. Chief Inspector, please. This was the action of a single rogue employee. This was not authorized or condoned by airline management in any way. Evelyn knelt, pulling out a set of evidence bags from her satchel. She began carefully collecting ash fragments from the floor around the bin. Federal law under 18 U.S. Code, Section 11361, she stated as she worked, makes no distinction between authorized and unauthorized destruction of government property. The felony occurred. Corporate knowledge of your employee's history of biased behavior will determine the extent of your company's liability. She pulled out her tablet again and began taking high-resolution photos of the scene. The melted seal, the scattered ashes. She took screenshots of the numerous live streams, documenting the crime from every angle. Under 18 U.S. Code, Section 1361, willful destruction of government property carries a sentence of up to 10 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000. She announced this loud enough for the entire gate area to hear. Karen's confident facade had not just cracked, it had disintegrated into dust, just like the passport. However, Evelyn continued, her finger tapping on the tablet, when the destruction targets the credentials of a federal law enforcement officer during a national security audit, federal sentencing guidelines recommend the maximum penalty. Furthermore, additional charges under 18 U.S. Code, Section 1505, for obstruction of proceedings before departments, agencies, and committees each carry a sentence of up to 5 years. The airport security officers now understood the cataclysmic scale of what had happened on their watch. A gate agent had destroyed the credentials of a Department of Defense inspector in front of the entire world. "Chief Inspector?" Officer Carter asked respectfully. "What kind of audit were you conducting?" Evelyn closed her tablet and looked directly at him, her gaze sweeping over the airline staff. "A multi-agency investigation into patterns of systemic discrimination in transportation security. We've been analyzing how implicit bias in airline personnel can be exploited by foreign intelligence services to create disruptions and probe security responses." The devastating, beautiful irony of the situation settled over them like a shroud. Karen's blatant racism, her assumption that a black woman couldn't possibly belong in first class, had led her to commit a federal crime against the very agent investigating that exact security vulnerability. She had not only proven Evelyn's hypothesis, she had become its poster child. Tom Rodriguez took one last desperate look at Evelyn's credentials, praying for a sign, any sign, that they were fakes. But the seal of the Department of Defense was a symbol of absolute, unassailable power. "Ms. O'Malley will be detained immediately, pending federal charges," Evelyn announced with the quiet finality of a judge passing sentence. "Destruction of federal property, interference with a federal investigation, obstruction of justice, and multiple federal civil rights violations." Karen looked down at the passport ashes scattered on the floor and clinging to the hem of her uniform. The evidence of her felonies was literally all over her. Evelyn's phone rang. The caller ID read, "U.S. Marshal Service, on site." "Your federal escort has arrived, Ms. O'Malley," Evelyn informed her. "I strongly advise you to be cooperative." The global live stream audience watched, utterly transfixed, as the power dynamic executed a complete and spectacular reversal. The woman they had seen, humiliated, demeaned, and stripped of her identity, was now revealed to be a high-ranking federal inspector, a ghost in the system who had just orchestrated the public downfall of her tormentor. Evelyn bent down and picked up a final charred fragment of her passport photo. Half her face was gone, burned away, but her federal inspector credentials lay on the counter, immaculate and devastatingly real. The hunter had just become the hunted. The victim had become the prosecutor, and every glorious second of it was preserved forever in unassailable, high-definition video evidence. A phalanx of U.S. Marshals, clad in tactical gear, moved through the terminal with a quiet, intimidating efficiency that made the airport security guards look like mall cops. Their heavy boots echoed on the linoleum, a drumbeat of impending justice. The lead marshal, a stern-faced woman named Rebecca Santos, approached Evelyn with professional deference. "Chief Inspector Reed, we're here to execute the federal arrest warrant." Evelyn nodded towards Karen, who was now catatonic in her chair, staring blankly at the ashes on the floor. Karen O'Malley, employee ID 784591. Charges include federal document destruction, obstruction of justice, and assault on a federal officer. Just then, the airline's corporate vice president of North American operations, Patricia Hawthorne, burst through the crowd, her expensive suit looking disheveled. She had clearly been rushed from the executive lounge. Behind her scurried a team of corporate lawyers, clutching briefcases like shields. "What is the status of our corporate liability here?" she demanded of Tom Rodriguez, ignoring everyone else. Evelyn answered for him. She held up her tablet, displaying the relevant federal statutes. Under 18 U.S. Code, Section 11361, your employee's felony destruction of federal property creates significant corporate exposure. Given her documented history of similar behavior, your company's vicarious liability could reach the statutory maximum. Patricia's face went chalk white. "What is the maximum?" "For the criminal exposure, a fine of up to $50 million, Evelyn stated calmly. The civil rights violations under 42 U.S. Code, Section 1983, carry potentially unlimited damages. Furthermore, the violations of your federal contracts could trigger an immediate suspension of your operating certificates at every one of the 98 U.S. airports you service." The airline's lawyers began typing furiously into their own tablets, their faces a mask of horror. The senior counsel, Marcus Webb, whispered urgently to Patricia, "Our annual federal contract revenue is $12.4 billion. A suspension would cost us over $1 billion a month. This is a potential company-killing event." Evelyn wasn't finished. She swiped to another screen. "Your airline's own records show that Ms. O'Malley has been the subject of 22 prior passenger complaints for discriminatory behavior and aggressive document challenges in the last 18 months. Tom Rodriguez's hands began to shake violently. He knew about those complaints. He had signed off on dismissing every single one of them. 22 documented complaints, Evelyn confirmed, reading from her tablet. 19 involving passengers of color, all dismissed by regional management without a formal investigation. This establishes a clear and convincing pattern of corporate knowledge and deliberate indifference to repeated civil rights violations. Patricia snatched the tablet from Tom, her eyes blazing with fury as she read the complaint history her own managers had ignored. The lawyers huddled around her, their hushed whispers painting a grim picture of legal catastrophe. "This is corporate liability under Section 1983, the lead counsel murmured. "Deliberate indifference is the standard. We're cooked." A team of federal prosecutors arrived, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kim. Evelyn briefed him with crisp efficiency as Patricia and her legal team looked on in a state of panic. "Complete, multi-angle video documentation from over 24 sources," Evelyn reported. "Over 1.2 million eyewitnesses via social media. Physical evidence has been secured. 22 prior complaints establish a pattern of corporate negligence." Prosecutor Kim examined the evidence bag containing the passport ashes. A slow smile spread across his face. "This is a gift from the prosecutorial gods," he said. "A federal felony committed against a DoD inspector during a documented civil rights investigation, captured on viral video, with a long history of corporate indifference to back it up. We won't even need a jury." Patricia, seeing her career and company circling the drain, attempted to grovel. "We will cooperate in every way possible, Mr. Kim. Ms. O'Malley is terminated, effective immediately. We will mandate new company-wide anti-discrimination training." Evelyn looked up from her notes. "Ms. Hawthorne, Terminating her doesn't negate the federal felonies she committed. Your employee destroyed government property and assaulted a federal officer. The criminal prosecution will proceed regardless of her employment status. The federal marshals gently but firmly placed Karen in restraints. Ash from Evelyn's passport smudged the sleeve of her uniform as the handcuffs clicked shut. The physical evidence of her crime was literally on her person. "I didn't know it was real," Karen finally sobbed, the dam of her arrogance breaking into a flood of pathetic tears. "It just looked so fake." "Ignorance of the law is not a defense to breaking it," Prosecutor Kim informed her coldly. Evelyn turned back to Patricia, her voice now carrying the full weight of federal enforcement. "Your airline is now subject to immediate federal action. A full review of your operating certificates begins Monday morning. All of your gate operations, nationwide, will be subject to direct federal monitoring pending the results of a full compliance review." Patricia's legal team did the math. Federal monitoring cost airlines, on average, $1.5 million per month per major hub. A full compliance review could take 2 to 3 years. Our stock has already plunged 18% since the live stream went viral, the company's CFO reported over the phone. The markets are reacting to the news that our employee burned a DoD agent's passport. We are in freefall. Evelyn displayed one final devastating piece of information. Federal Aviation Regulation Part 121 allows for the immediate emergency suspension of all operating privileges for any airline whose employees are found to have willfully compromised federal security protocols. Your certificate covers 1,200 daily flights across 28 states. The numbers were staggering. Daily revenue loss of nearly $4 million. Federal fines starting at $200,000 per incident. Legal defense costs skyrocketing into the tens of millions. "What do you want from us?" Patricia asked, her voice a raw whisper of defeat. Evelyn's response was not a negotiation. It was a list of demands. Immediate implementation of federally designed bias monitoring systems at all 98 of your U.S. gates. Cost? Approximately $5.1 million. Mandatory federally administered discrimination and de-escalation training for all 4,500 of your customer-facing employees. Cost? $2.5 million annually. You will create and fund a new C-suite level position, a chief compliance officer who will report directly to my office at the Department of Transportation. And, she continued, you will establish a $15 million victim compensation fund for the passengers affected by your company's documented pattern of discrimination. Patricia's lawyers scribbled frantically. The total cost of federal compliance would exceed $30 million in the first year alone, not including the fines or civil damages. And to be clear, Evelyn added, these corporate compliance measures are non-negotiable and are separate from the criminal prosecution of Ms. O'Malley. These actions address your systemic civil rights failures. Deputy Marshal Santos read Karen her Miranda rights as the cameras continued to roll. The woman who had, less than an hour ago, wielded her petty authority with such glee was now a federal prisoner, her life and career destroyed by her own bigotry. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a federal court of law. Evelyn pulled up a final enforcement document. Ms. Hawthorne, your airline has 48 hours to submit a signed letter of intent to comply with all federal mandates. Failure to do so will trigger the automatic suspension of your operating certificates under the Patriot Act. The boarding display for Flight 1881 now read, "Cancelled." Patricia Hawthorne finally understood the bitter irony. Evelyn's investigation was designed to find security holes created by bias. Karen hadn't just been an example. She had been the perfect proof, providing irrefutable, spectacular evidence of a systemic rot that would now cost her company hundreds of millions of dollars to cure. How long will the federal monitoring last? Patricia asked weakly. Evelyn closed her tablet. Until my department determines that your airline is in full and consistent compliance with federal anti-discrimination law, based on your company's current record, I would plan for a minimum of 10 years of direct federal oversight. Federal crime scene investigators arrived and began meticulously collecting every last speck of ash, photographing the scene, and taking statements from the hundreds of passengers who had witnessed the crime. Evelyn's phone showed 32 missed calls from major news networks. The story was now the #1 headline on the planet. Chief Inspector, Prosecutor Kim asked, will you require a medical evaluation for the assault charge? Evelyn considered it. The destruction of my credentials was a direct impediment to my ability to perform my duties as a federal officer. I will need that documented for the case file. Patricia paled further. Assault on a federal officer. The charges just kept piling up. The corporate execution was complete. Evelyn had surgically dismantled the airline's defenses, documenting every facet of its liability, from Karen's individual crimes to the company's systemic civil rights failures. The airline, and the entire industry, was now on notice. Evelyn picked up the last, largest fragment of her burned passport. The document Karen had destroyed in a fit of racist pique was now the cornerstone of a landmark federal case that would revolutionize civil rights enforcement in America forever. Justice, Evelyn thought, would not be measured in revenge, but in systematic, federally mandated change. 3 months later, at the Everett M. Dirksen U.S. Courthouse in Chicago, Judge Annabelle Clark brought down her gavel. On the charge of destruction of government property under 18 U.S. Code, Section 1361, this court finds the defendant, Karen O'Malley, guilty. Karen, clad in a drab prison jumpsuit, collapsed into sobs. Your actions were not merely a crime against property, Judge Clark continued, her voice ringing with authority. They were an attack on the rule of law and an affront to the federal officers who risk their lives to protect this nation. This court sentences you to 48 months in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Evelyn watched from the gallery. In her briefcase was a new passport, identical to the one that had been burned. This one, however, was now a symbol of a revolution. Outside, AUSA David Kim faced a wall of cameras. This conviction sends an unmistakable message, he declared. Civil rights are not optional. Federal law will be enforced, and those who obstruct the agents of that enforcement will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. 6 months later, at the White House, the President of the United States signed the Fair Skies Act into law. Standing directly behind him, a guest of honor, was Chief Inspector Evelyn Reed. This landmark legislation, born from the courage and professionalism of one federal officer, mandates the implementation of real-time bias detection and intervention systems at every commercial airport in the United States, the President announced. The law, based on a framework Evelyn herself had designed, was revolutionary. AI-powered algorithms would now monitor all passenger-agent interactions, flagging discriminatory language, disproportionate scrutiny, or biased behavior for immediate federal review. A year later, at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Gate C-34 looked completely different. It was now a prototype for the Reed Protocol Fair Skies system. A small, tasteful plaque was mounted on the wall. This gate is dedicated to the principle that dignity and justice must be afforded to all, under the law. Tom Rodriguez, no longer a station manager, was now the airline's first-ever federal compliance and equity officer. His new job consisted of ensuring his company never again ran afoul of the laws his ignorance had allowed to be broken. Every gate agent now wore a body camera, and every interaction was analyzed by a DoD-designed AI. Discrimination complaints against the airline had dropped by 97%. Leo Carter, the teenager whose live stream had broken the story, received a full scholarship to Northwestern School of Journalism. funded by an anonymous donation from the new $15 million passenger compensation fund. He became a leading voice for citizen journalism and digital accountability. Evelyn's career had ascended into the stratosphere. She was now the director of the newly formed Civil Rights Enforcement Division for the entire Department of Transportation, a joint DoD-DOT task force. Her office, with a view of the U.S. Capitol, had only one decoration on the wall: the framed, half-burned photo from her destroyed passport. It was a constant reminder that hatred, when met with calm, professional, and overwhelming force, would always burn itself out. Her work had led to over $200 million in federal fines and mandated compliance investments across the entire transportation industry. The ashes of her passport had become the seeds of a nationwide transformation. Evelyn's story proves that the most powerful response to bigotry isn't rage, but excellence. Her methodical documentation, her unshakable composure, and her strategic use of legitimate authority created systemic change that will protect millions of travelers for decades to come. Karen O'Malley's attempt to erase one black woman's identity backfired so spectacularly that it ended up enshrining new protections for all people. But her work, and ours, is not done. Discrimination still exists. It lurks in airports, in banks, in hospitals, and on our streets. Evelyn's example is a call to action. It shows us how to fight back, not with anger, but with evidence. Have you witnessed discrimination? Your phone is a powerful tool for accountability. Document what you see. Report it to the appropriate federal agencies, like the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division or the Department of Transportation. If you were inspired by Evelyn Reed's story of brilliance and resolve, please subscribe to Blacktail Stories and hit that notification bell. Our community is dedicated to sharing these powerful accounts of excellence, overcoming prejudice. Share this video to raise awareness about our federal civil rights and the power we have to enforce them. And now, I want to hear from you. Comment below. What was the single most powerful moment in this story for you? Let's discuss the lessons we can learn from Dr. Reed's masterclass in justice. Together, we can ensure that the ashes of hatred give birth to a revolution of rights.